This is the Spur Leadership Podcast, number 12. What do you get when you cross paths with a Marine Corps sniper and the former governor of Texas? You get a fascinating look into the influences and the forces that forged the character of Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer and Governor Rick Perry, currently serving as the United States Secretary of Energy. We've all had people in our lives who made a difference, teachers and coaches, bosses and mentors. But for most of us, whether we realize it or not, those influences, those voices are vying for second place. Few figures in our lives have the influence or carry the weight, good, bad, and ugly, of our dads and the men who speak into our lives. This conversation took place on Father's Day at Lake Hills Church, but it quickly transcended a typical church service to become a roadmap to the power of positive masculinity. I'm so grateful to both of y'all for making time out of your schedule to be here and to talk about Father's Day and talk about fatherhood. I want to begin, Governor Perry, I want to talk to you, I want to ask you a little bit about your dad. I had the opportunity to meet him and be with him a few times and was incredibly gracious, and I also was picking up the vibe that this was not a man to be trifled with. Kind of a hardcore West Texas rancher. Tell us a little bit about your growing up years with him and his influence in your life.
And you're right, he was a most interesting man, very stoic. My dad was he was a person of few words. And in the earlier service, Dakota was talking about how the people that he had learned from by and large, and same is true with me, is that they didn't instruct me verbally a lot. They instructed me by their actions. And my dad was certainly one of those. I mean, he was a hard-working guy. Grew up out in that old, dry, desolate part. Dad referred to, we live 200 miles west of Fort Worth, 60 miles north of Abilene. So those of you that know, your Texas geography, if you start up here on the eastern side of the Panhandle, go down the Red River and count 4 counties down. That's Haskell County. Dad referred to it as the Big Empty. and what a great descriptive term, the Big Empty. There was nobody lived out there. It was like 900 square miles and 4,500 people lived in that. And Paint Creek was our home. And Paint Creek, until I got to be governor, wasn't on the road map. So I literally put Paint Creek on the road map.
That's great.
I did. I told him, I said, it's right there on Farmer Market Road 618. I want a dot, and I want Paint Creek on there. And so when you look at a Texas State Highway map today, Paint Creek's on the map. So Dad was a hard-working, farmer and rancher. My dad was the best cotton farmer I'd ever been around in my life. Me not so much. But just and my dad we were talking about people who impacted our lives when we were growing up, the men, the father figures, both literally your father and the ones that were your father figures. I had 3. My high school coach was one of them, and my scoutmaster. Now, interestingly, they were all in the military. My dad was a B-17 tail gunner in 1944. He spent 35 missions in the tail of a B-17 in the latter part of 1944, early 1945, and before he came home. Gene Overton, who was my scoutmaster, class of 1932 from the beloved Texas A&M. Whoop! He was my scoutmaster, the superintendent of the Sunday school, and the school board president. So he had a lot of influence on me. And then my football coach, who was also my basketball coach, and my track coach, and the civics teacher, and the principal, and drove a school bus.
That's great.
You got to do a lot of stuff out at Paint Creek. We didn't have a lot of.
He drove the school bus.
Didn't have a lot of people. He did drove a school bus every day. Anyhow, all of those fellows had a real influence on me. And generally speaking, now they all had their ways of influencing you, verbally, instruction, and what have you, but it's how they lived their lives. And I was telling Mac earlier, I said, Coach Mickler, he was a Marine. One day we were in a basketball tournament, and we were not playing as focused as he wanted us to be playing. And he said, let me tell you something. If you're not up by 10 points at the half, everybody in here is getting a lick. Now, I know a lot of you young people here don't know what getting a lick is all about. We had corporal punishment back in the 60s. And we were up by 8 at the half, and he'd call for 10. And he took a wooden slat out of the back of an oak chair and gave everybody a lick. This is hardcore, man. This is a Marine. It's kind of like, this is how you're going to do it.
He said 10, and it was only 8.
That's right. He said, I need 10. And anyway, that's the kind of man he was. He was, man, a few words, but lots of action. So, but what I was telling him, he instructed both verbally and by how he lived his life. And he impressed upon us that cussing was bad. And he said, you know why people cuss? I said, no, sir, Coach Mickler. He said, because they're not smart enough to come up with another word.
Yeah, I'm guilty.
Just saying.
Just saying. Well, Dakota, that's a great segue. Tell us your story. I know you grew up in Kentucky, but tell us a little bit about kind of how you grew up, your family of origin, but also your dad and the men in your life that had that influence.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. I definitely didn't put it on the map or anything. But I didn't even know that they made houses without wheels until I was like 10, I think. But we did upgrade. We actually moved from a single wide into a double wide. Big deal. But moved up. But my father was just so incredible. I think the thing that, like, obviously I didn't understand as a kid. I always thought that it was something bad, and I kind of used it as the victim card, right? But I found out when I was 13 that I was adopted. And my father had adopted me at a young age. And you talk about, now let's talk about this. You talk about flipping the script. You think everybody's your family, and then at 13 they're like, you're adopted. And I was like, whoa, so what else are you lying to me about, right? No. But, my father was a man, a few words, and he, he was stoic. I mean, he didn't talk about his feelings. He just was a man who just, you learn from him through his actions. Like I said last time, he took my line. Yes, sir. But he just taught you through actions. And my dad was always, he was not, it wasn't a democracy in our house, it was a dictatorship, right? Like I didn't have this one thing, and it was like options. It was like I did what my dad said, and he instilled hard work into me to never give up, and to do the right thing, right? I mean, he's like, it's not hard to be a good human being. And, those are the principles he stuck in me. And he's always there. He always, no matter what, he wasn't my friend. He was my father.
Yeah.
And he said this one thing that really stuck with me. And he said, I don't care what you think of me today. I care what you think of me when you have kids.
Wow.
And I look at him now,
it's not just a great line. I mean, that's a great principle to parent by.
Yeah.
I care what you think about me when you have kids.
Yeah, now, and I just, that's the standard in my house of being a father is if I can be half the father that he was, then I'm successful.
Right. I think, one of the reasons that I really wanted our church to hear from y'all on this Father's Day is because a lot of times, we know and we realize that like we do at Mother's Day, Father's Day is not a celebration for everyone. That not everybody has a great relationship with their dad, that not everybody has been blessed, that you know, I think all of us would agree as dads that on our best days, dads are a mixed bag, you know. But there are those situations where it's less than even a mixed bag. It can be really negative, and a lot of people have a lot of hurt from their dad, from their families of origin. But I think it's important to step back for a second and go, what is it that God has taught me, good, bad, and ugly? Julie and I have a joke with Emily and Joseph, you know, whenever they tell us something that we've done wrong or whatever, we're like, just put it on the list and tell it to your counselor. I mean, you're going to have, you know, they're all going to, that's a joke. You should have laughed at that a little bit more than that. But we know that we're not perfect. But it's an opportunity on Father's Day to kind of step back and realize that as imperfect as we are, even in our imperfections, we point our kids to the perfect Father. And on Father's Day, I think especially for us as a church, to step back and go that though our human earthly fathers are not perfect, we worship a good Father. We worship the perfect Father. And so that's where we learn from. That's where we go to for our example in parenting. I think Dakota, what you said just a second ago, that your dad was not interested in being your buddy. And I think in our culture, in our world, especially if you look at entertainment, men in particular and men in general and dads in particular are portrayed as such buffoons on TV and in movies. And we miss, I think, that example, you know, that you all had. And I've shared before, my parents divorced when I was 12. My dad hit the eject button on our family. But in looking back on, my dad was actually a really good dad until I was about 10 or 11 years old. And there was a lot of stuff that God built into my life through my dad that helped prepare me to handle his exit, if that makes sense. And so I can look, and there's a lot that I could still learn from my dad and realize that I was blessed by. But I just think on Father's Day, you kind of do step back and go, what are those things that you still hear subconsciously, you know, those things that you may not even recognize it, but what are the things, Dakota, that like you think about your dad being a good example? What are those things that you hear in your head even now as a dad?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to that. I'm not going to be, like, as easy it is with my girls, like, you know, they melt me. I mean, my girls walk in and they already know how to just get whatever they want. Like, they've already got a plan. They're two and three, and they already know they know what they're doing. It's crazy.
It's called playing you like a fiddle.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't sound good. But you know, I just always go back to when I start getting caught in of giving in on things. You know, my dad was always clear about setting the expectations. There was never a doubt. Like, my dad never had to raise his voice much. I mean, he didn't. Just the thought of letting my father down was, I mean, it was catastrophic, right? Like, it was just my dad looking at me and just knowing, like, just the thought of my dad knowing that I messed up and I let him down was just, it was crazy. So I always try to think of how can I be someone to my daughters to where they feel bad for just letting me down, right? Like make the expectations clear, make the, you know, consistency. But how do I become someone that they look up to, that they know is a good person, to enough to where they respect me that they don't want to let me down?
Right. Governor Perry, are there things that your dad did or said that you, even now, as a father and a grandfather, still hear his voice in your head?
Yeah, interesting. I was just thinking about this transitional period. You know, when we're young, and our fathers are tutoring us, they're giving us advice, and our father figures. You know, my scoutmaster who, you know, brought me along, and he was the reason I went to school at Texas A&M. You know, I tell people, thank God I didn't go to have a scoutmaster who was a T-SIP. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's okay.
Sorry, I just missed that. Just kidding, y'all. You know that, right?
Sort of.
Sort of.
Mostly.
But I had these individuals that were training me in preparation to become an adult, to be a man in this case. And I left home at 18, went off to, do what I was going to do. I actually went to college to be a veterinarian, and then organic chemistry made a pilot out of me. You'd had fun with that.
I wouldn't have showed up.
Yeah.
I can't even
But anyway,
spell
long story
chemistry.
short is I came back home after 4 years at Texas A&M, almost 5 years as a pilot in the United States Air Force. I'm 27 years old. I've been aircraft commander. The government trusted me enough to fly their multi-million-dollar airplane all around the world and bring it back. And I came back home, and to my dad, I'm still the 18-year-old kind of not necessarily mature young man. And of course, I'm looking at him, right? My dad didn't go to college. He was not smart like me. And, he hadn't been an officer in the United States Air Force. He'd just been an enlisted guy. And we had a little failure to communicate. We had some real difficult times when I moved home. And I literally moved back into my old room. I mean, Mom and Dad out there on Farnham Market Road, 618. I moved back into my old room that still had my football number on it. Had the all-star 6-man football program on the bulletin board in there, stuck on the wall. I moved back into my room, and the instructional period really began. And we had a very difficult time adjusting that I had matured. And somehow my dad became this brilliant fella over that 8-9 year period of time. I mean, he went from being this old, dogy, guy to being one of the smartest people I've ever dealt with in my life. And some other things occurred as well. Not only did he recognize that I had matured, that I had grown, and I became his partner. So I went from being his son to being his partner, then to being his best friend. And my father and I were incredibly close. Best friends. We'd call each other once a week, just to, once I left and came here in 1991. But it's that growing in that relationship, and it's very biblical in its structure. Where as a young person, you're fed milk, and as the Scripture teaches us, as we mature in our faith, then we get to where we can eat solid food, and we become strong, and we become mature in our faith. The same is true in our, and I was blessed. I mean, I had this great and good relationship with my dad, and even though we may have had, Coach Mickler that was telling me about that I wasn't smart enough if I used curse words, there was more than one time, I'm gonna admit something here in public, that I came home after working cattle with my dad, and it was always working cattle where we had our biggest arguments. And I'd come back in and apologize for what I'd call Dad during the working cattle. It was a very humbling experience. But
You had not used one of the smart words.
I had not used one of the smart words from time to time. But anyway, the point is that the growth that you see. Dakota and I were talking earlier that the Holy Spirit, as we bring ourselves to this place where we accept our salvation, and understand that it comes by God's grace, that it's, we can't earn this. From time to time I think, well, man, I'm going to go do X, and I'm going to do Y, and I'm going to do this. I think the book of James, it talks about that, people, they get together and they say, well, tomorrow I'm going to go down here and I'm going to do this kind of business and I'm going to do this. And no, if it's God's will, I'll go do these things. But we need to recognize that our works and our actions are not how we're going to get to go to heaven.
Right.
And so from time to time, that Holy Spirit kind of taps old Dakota on the shoulders. And
It's been smacking me.
kind of reminding us how this really works.
No doubt. No doubt. Dakota, I know, obviously, you and I spent some time together. Your life as a Marine followed a very unlikely path. You joined the Marine Corps pretty much right out of high school, and then through a series of events, you went to sniper school very early in your Marine career. For those of you who don't know, sniper school is not something you just show up and go, I'll do that. Like, you have to earn the right to try to qualify as a sniper in the Marines. Tell us a little bit about your story and just kind of how that actually happened.
Yeah, I left for boot camp at 17, June 18, 2006, and I spent my 18th birthday in boot camp. It wasn't really a birthday party or anything.
They didn't have cake for you in the Marines?
No. Mm-mm. Actually, I got to eat a ton of ice cream, and then we had to go run right after that until, anyways. So then I went to my unit. I went through and went to my unit. I was stationed in Hawaii. I got there on Thanksgiving weekend of 2006. And then what you do is you go to your unit as an infantryman, and then you can try out for, like, they do an NDOC, kind of like a tryout, whatever. And so you run the NDOC, and then they select you, and then you go on deployment with that sniper platoon, and then you come back after the deployment, and then you go to sniper school. And the attrition rate for sniper school was, it was over 50% at the time. And they gave me an option. Somebody dropped out or something. There was a seat that opened up, and they said, you can either go home on pre-deployment leave because we were heading to Iraq, Fallujah, or you can go to sniper school. And I'm like, I've been with my family for 18 years. I don't even want to go see them. I'd rather go sniper school right before I'm going to Iraq, right? And so I went to sniper school and actually passed. And then on my 19th birthday in sniper school, I went down with a heat case as a heat exhaustion. They had to pack me in ice, and I'll never forget. He stood over me and said, Skinta, actually one of the guys who I give taught me so much, another father figure, right, that taught me so much, and I hand it to him of why I'm standing here today. He said, you can either drop out, you can drop out, go to the hospital, or you can finish the course. And I was a week away from graduating, and I'm like, there's no way I'm dropping out. So he gave me 2 IVs, and he said, I'm not giving you extra food, no extra food, but I'll give you 2 IVs. So he gave me 2 IVs, and I finished. And so I graduated sniper school.
So no food, but here's some IV bags.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Golly.
So then I graduated, went to Iraq.
That's who you want as your sniper, by the way.
I don't know.
That's unbelievable. And so you're 19.
Yeah.
How old are guys usually coming out of sniper school?
Around that age, it's, 20,
They are?
20, 21, I was one of the youngest ones in there, and then, I was the youngest, and then I graduated, and then I turned around, left for Iraq immediately, and then came back, and then I went to Afghanistan after that.
In 09.
In 09,
correct?
Yeah.
Dakota has been very open about the fact that what happened in Afghanistan and receiving the Medal of Honor obviously is an honor, and for him is a burden. It represents the worst day of his life. So it's not something that you're like, hey, I won the Medal of Honor. But I think it's been through that experience that you all have a unique connection via Marcus Luttrell and his experiences, because, and Marcus likewise has been very open about the fact that when he got out of the Navy and retired from the teams, he was in a really bad place physically, psychologically, in every way, and literally showed up on the doorstep of the governor's mansion. You all had met out at the SEAL training grounds in San Diego, I think. Marcus, and Governor Perry said, hey, if you're ever in Texas, come by the governor's mansion. So Marcus, Governor Perry home? And that's literally, I mean, he literally knocked on the door. And what a lot of people don't know is that Mrs. Perry was a registered nurse. And they got to know Marcus and got to be around him. And it was Mrs. Perry who could see in Marcus that he wasn't where he needed to be, personally, physically, psychologically, and essentially said, you shouldn't live like this the rest of your life. And they took him into the governor's mansion to help him heal up for over 2 years. Nobody knew about it, no press releases, no photographs. They were just loving on Marcus. And it was through that relationship that Marcus was literally nursed back to health by Governor and Mrs. Perry. And Dakota, you've been so open about, PTSD and what you've dealt with in the aftermath of your time in Afghanistan. But Marcus has been doing for you what the Perrys did for him, Marcus and Melanie. And I just think it's an amazing, going back to what you said just a second ago, it's the relationship. Because Marcus didn't have a great relationship with his dad, as he's been, pretty vocal about. He had a terrible relationship with his dad, but he did get fathered by you. And what you poured into him, even though he's not old enough to be your dad, Dakota, he's given you a safe place to heal up. Melanie and he have given you a safe place at their place over kind of East Texas a little bit. And I think, Governor Perry, I'd love to ask you, talk about your relationship with Marcus and kind of how that has informed your view of the world and how you operate.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had no knowledge about post-traumatic stress. I mean, it was just concussions, traumatic brain injury, all those types of things. They were a bit foreign to me until literally the detail calls up. We had met him in August of 2006. It was about a year after, and he was just healing up. He still had substantial physical wounds, and you could, I knew there was something not right with him from a mental standpoint. He slept with a light on all the time. He was very jumpy, and anyway, long story short, we met him, and as you told, I just said, hey, if you ever by Austin, come by, I'd love to see you. And I called his mom when we got back in August of 06. Well, in May of 07, the guys down at the on the security detail called and said, hey, there's some guy down here says that you told him if he was ever in town, come by, and what do you want us to do with you? And I said, send him on in. And
is that why you never gave me the address?
Yeah.
You learned that lesson, didn't you?
Yeah. Like, once was enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, he came in in May and August of 09. Finally, we sent him out the door to actually to go to a place that really helped him a lot on some of his other issues. But the point is that I became really intrigued with this whole issue of post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. And then, by the grace of God, 8 years later, I end up at the Department of Energy, and we are working on post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury at the Department of Energy. Most people kind of go, wait a minute, what's the Department of Energy got to do with those medical issues? The department is home to 5 of the 10 fastest supercomputers in the world. Matter of fact, the 3 fastest supercomputers in the world are at Oak Ridge Laboratory, at Argonne, and at Lawrence Livermore, which the department operates. And we have a partnership with the University of California, San Francisco's neuroscience department And so we do some of the most cutting edge work on post-traumatic stress and TBI now. And it all goes back to my interest with Marcus. So there are now thousands of young people. The NFL we're in negotiations with the NFL because of their CTE and the concussion issues that they've got there, working with them. And so it's just, the point with all of this is there's concentric circles of influence, and all of this is happening on people. And it all goes back to, having, that God said, look, this is I need you here. This is where you need to be engaged. This is what you need to be doing. You need to help this young man. And so literally thousands of people are now being helped because he listened, Marcus listened, I listened to that tap on the shoulder when the Holy Spirit said, this is where I need you.
It's an amazing, amazing thing. Dakota, tell us just a little bit about kind of your relationship with Marcus. And on one hand, I hate that Marcus isn't here. On another hand, it's kind of fun because we can talk about him.
Yeah,
and
we
can't
say
do anything
whatever.
about it. But tell us a little bit about kind of how your relationship with him has helped you process through some of just the junk that you acquired going through war. I think that's, for those of us who haven't been where you've been, it's hard for us to even comprehend, but we can understand that it's real. Talk about how your relationship with Marcus has helped you kind of work through that.
Well, I think first off, I think you got to put in perspective. I think we look at father a little bit, as far as our title as father, a little different. We look at father, the title as a responsibility of us to take care of our own blood kids, right? I mean, but it's more, you can be a father and have an impactful experience on everybody you come in contact with. And so, Marcus, obviously he's not old. He is old, but Marcus, let's just get that out there. He's really old. We talk about it all the time, but he's old.
He's over 40.
He is over 40. He's old.
Yeah, but Marcus is like a 4-year-old car that's got 100,000 miles on him. He's only 40-something, but he's got a lot of miles on him.
A lot of miles. So he is old. So he's just I'll never forget the first day I showed up at his ranch. I was in a frenzy. I've been open about it. I got really bad anxiety. I have no clue where it comes from. I've been shot at a couple times, but I'll never forget one day I was just literally throwing up from anxiety. And he's he's very direct. Marcus is very direct. He's he's just not going to fluff anything.
He does not know subtle.
No. And he's just get to the ranch. Here's my address. Here's the gate code. I'll meet you there. And that's it. And I called him back 5 times. He said, I ain't talking to you. Just get to the ranch. So I just take off driving. It's 3 hours away, and I just start driving. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm at. He's like, just come in here. You get behind these gates, and it's all going to be fixed. I'm like, all right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. I'm on my way. I pull in there. Marcus is the only one at the house. He's standing there behind his couch watching TV. And I walk in, and I'm having a meltdown, a meltdown. And he just looks at me and goes, what's wrong with you? And I'm and I just start laying all these problems out.
I went to a war?
Yeah. Well, I just start laying all these problems out. And he's like, I ain't nothing. You're having a good day. I don't know how you wake up and don't have a good day. He just starts firing at me. And, and being around him and having that truth sometimes, the truth of just reality, he's like, okay, you went over and did what you had to do. I was always down about, I lost my whole team in Afghanistan. Always felt guilty about it. And Marcus is he's like, those guys went down their boots for their country. He's like, they're living their best life. What are you feeling sorry for them about? And he's like, you're just feeling sorry for yourself, so get over it. And, some of that hard truth of reminding me who I am, of having that and then watching Marcus. Marcus was a incredible Navy SEAL. I mean, just done some crazy stuff. But he's even more, the most I respect about Marcus is how he is as a father, as a man, as a husband. I mean, he could go down as the Alexander the Great as far as a warrior. But I'm telling you right now, as far as not only a father, a husband, a friend, a warrior, a Christian, like Marcus has figured out the formula. And you got to look at it, and it's so interesting because he learned it from the guy who's sitting next to me. And it's just incredible. So, watching, being able to see that, and I think I'm an example of what, I can't ever take the credit for anything I've ever done. I've just always been surrounded by such incredible people that have always shown me what the right way is and to help me to that standard, even when I didn't even believe in myself.
Yeah. It's an amazing testimony, and I think it goes back to, Dakota, something that you said at the very beginning of our conversation, that it's about the relationship. It's about the relationship that you have with Marcus. And I think, too, when you are having that anxiety, not just you, I mean, when anyone is dealing with anxiety, with stress, truth is the greatest antidote to anxiety. What's real? Because usually what I'm anxious about is about what might happen or what could happen, which means by definition it hasn't happened. So I've got to be anchored in the truth, and the one who is the author of all truth is Jesus Christ, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And to have that truth spoken to you by somebody, I think it also helps that Marcus has been where you've been. He has been under fire. He's experienced what you've experienced, but you can see in him an example of somebody who has come through the fire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, and I don't look at, and when I think about Marcus, I don't look at him as a Navy SEAL. I don't think of him as a guy who's been shot at. Like, it never even comes up. I look at him and I say, I want to live a life that's as honorable as he lives every day. And, I think that's what we can all relate on. It's not, you don't have to go get shot at. You don't have to serve in the military to be able to connect with each other. It's a matter of finding a reason to connect and, not comparing. We're always trying to one-up each other. We're always trying to compare, and we're always trying to focus on these things that really don't even matter, when it's all about just how can you take care of each other and be there for each other and connect with each other.
I don't know that you could wrap up a message to dads any better than that. Would you join me in thanking Dakota Meyer and Governor Rick Perry?
Thank you for checking out the Spur Leadership Podcast with Mac Richard. Be sure and subscribe, and while you're at it, leave us a review or a comment. You can reach us by email at podcast@spurleadership.com, and you can also find us on Twitter at Spur Leadership or on Facebook at Spur Leadership.